to our weekly Traction Lab Startup Reality Check, aka Office Hours, aka Ask Us Anything, where you may be surprised to learn, ask us anything. We're here to take whatever questions that you guys have about startups, about fundraising, about product market fit, about traction, about the science of it all, about whatever it is that you have that's related to entrepreneurship more generally. Ordinarily, I'd be here with my buddy and co-founder of the Traction Lab, Cameron Law, but Cameron is on vacation this week. He'll be back next week for Office Hours. So I'm riding solo. You're free to drop whatever questions that you might have into the chat, whether that be the YouTube chat on that side, the LinkedIn comments down below. Throw them at me. We prioritize the live ones, but you can also submit your questions in advance if you go to tractionlab.io. I think it's a content link at the top right there. You can submit a question. We have 5 questions that got submitted. So excited to go through all of those, but whatever you guys got, drop them live and I'm more than happy to take them. Let's just start with the first one, which is B2B SaaS for restaurants. They're at the paid pilot stage and they say, how do you know when to stop doing pilots and just charge everyone? We have a handful paying, but most are still free. And I keep telling myself we need more data before we commit to pricing. Okay, so I actually want to challenge a little bit the perspective that you have on what you're doing here. There's a difference between committing to pricing and seeing if people will pay. Those are 2 very different things. And even if you start charging for something right now, it doesn't mean that you have to commit to that pricing long term. You can always change pricing. Startups do it all the time. You're going to find more efficient ways of pricing, more efficient ways of extracting value from customers, more efficient ways of structuring the packages for how real users end up engaging with the product. They like these features and not this one. Unless you're in this category, then you really need these extra features. That tells us that these 2 plans and they're going to pay more for that one, all that stuff. But that comes over time. But none of that matters if you can't get people paying for it in the first place. So the very first thing that you have to do is to get to charging people. Period. At the end of the sentence, right? It's when do you stop doing pilots and just start charging? From day one. A free pilot is without any strict parameters behind it is really just a free trial, and you're getting lots of false positives, lots of noise. It's difficult to find the signal, and you end up building not toward product market fit, but product freeloader fit. So instead, you want to figure out how exactly can I get people to charge can I get people to pay, because I want to know the difference between the customers who won't pay and the customers who will, because I don't want to waste my money on the first group. So that's it's really all I have to say about that, I think. How do you know when? The answer is now. Do it right now. Well, that was going to be a fast one. Okay, cool, awesome. So we'll move straight into the next question. But if you've got a question that you want to ask live, drop it into the LinkedIn comments down below. YouTube chat off to the right. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going through the ones that were submitted in advance. TractionLab.io, hit content. You could submit your question in advance too. More than happy to take them. All right, here we go. Number 2 in the list. This is a B2B SaaS for dentists now. Got some experience in the space, worked with a couple of startups that serve dentists. They're at the early revenue stage, and they say the dentist loves it, but the office manager is the one who actually decides, and she keeps pushing back on cost. Feels like we're selling to the wrong person, but the dentist is the one who gets value. How do we deal with this? And they said also sales taking forever because of this. Okay, so this is great. So this is a microcosm of what we see in enterprise sales all the time, where you actually aren't selling to a person, you're selling to an ecosystem. And that there are different roles within that ecosystem that different people play. There is the economic buyer, the one who actually writes the check. There's an end user who's presumably getting some value out of it. There are various stakeholders who have some input into the purchasing process, but ultimately don't make the decision themselves. We have people who need to give their approval. So it's not necessarily their decision, but maybe the CFO has to sign off on any purchases of a certain size. And you also have saboteurs, people who don't want this deal to go through for their own reasons. Some of them can be completely logical and justifiable, and other ones ones can be irrational and self-interested, but they're still going to sabotage you just the same. So you got to know about them. A really common situation when you're selling to enterprise is to have a saboteur that's IT, because that money would be going otherwise to the IT department to solve this in some way, and kind of outsourcing it not only takes their budget, but also hits their ego a little bit, rightly or wrongly. Like, well, we can solve this problem. We don't need to pay some outside company to solve this problem. We can bring our data together and do all of that. So then they end up sabotaging the deal, and you're never even in the room, when it happens. And that leads me to the broader point to connect this back to this question, which is certainly not enterprise sales, just like sounds like to small dental practices, is that we have to understand what that ecosystem is and what everybody's role in the process is in order for us to be able to successfully sell into that ecosystem. If we're spending all of our energy, for example, on something that dentists like and dentists want to pay for and dentists want to sign off on, but we have to go through the office manager to get there, there's a fundamental misalignment between what we're trying to sell and how we need to sell it. And so that leads me to a couple of follow-up questions that I have for you, is that first, why are we talking to the office managers as opposed to the dentists? Is that a function of we don't know how to get a hold of the dentists, and so we're having to choose to talk to the office managers who then are playing a gatekeeper role? Or is it that the dentists are saying, well, the office manager makes those decisions. I really want this, but they make those decisions. Or are you hearing from the dentist, well, yes, I want this, but the office manager is the one who signs all the paperwork there? Those are three very different scenarios. And if it's none of those, you should just be talking directly to the dentist anyway, because you said they're the ones who are actually getting value, and they're the ones who own the business usually at the end of the day anyway. But if it's one of those other three, then things are going to get interesting really fast. So I'm going to set the first one aside for a second and just deal with the second two, where you're getting a signal from the dentists that the office manager is playing a big role in this. What you might be getting here is misled, because they actually might be blowing you off. They might be trying to be polite by saying, like, oh yes, I really like this, but this is the office manager's decision. Then the office manager blows you off and you're blaming the office manager, when really the dentist was never that interested in the first place. Because if he was, if this dentist really did want your product and really did like it, she would just tell the office manager to do it. But she's not. She's passing you off to the office manager, who is then, giving you the runaround. So that's something really important to keep in mind, is that if you're getting bumped down the chain of command to somebody else, it's probably the case that they weren't that interested in the first place. Otherwise, you can still lean on them to facilitate the sales process. Can you, let's get a meeting with the three of us on the books, that kind of thing. All right, assuming that back to the first one, that this is a case where the office managers are the right people to talk to, they're the only ones you can get a hold of, you have to get through them, but ultimately it's a dentist at the end of the day. And so if you talk to dentists that they love it, but you can't really get a hold of them, you got to work with the office managers anyway, then now we're back to this ecosystem. And the question becomes, what is it that the office managers either need or want or fear from the tool? So if they just don't care at all and it's just not high on their priority list, then that kind of gives you a pretty strong signal that you can't sell through that mechanism, because they're never going to be on the same page as you. Then we either have to find a way to get around them and go directly to the dentists, or we need to find some way of serving the office managers. But if it's not that, if they do have some things that they could be getting out of this, that they do want or they do need, or that they fear that your product can help them with, then we can choose to reorient how we're actually talking about it to focus on the problem of the person that we're talking to, of the office manager. Because if we're talking to an office manager but only talking about problems that the dentist experience, that makes it less valuable for the office manager. We need to make it about the office manager. Otherwise, we're never going to sell to them. So that's how I deal with that. Cool. Awesome. Thank you for the pre-submitted question. If you are who I think you are asking this question, then good to see you again, but they're anonymous, so I won't give it away. Great. Always prioritize the live questions. If you guys do have a question about startups that you want to ask us at the Traction Lab, drop them down in the comments. Ordinarily, I'd be here with Cameron. He's on vacation. He'll be back next week. So I'm kind of going solo. Thank you for bearing with me 2 weeks in a row, having to do this by myself with no banter. I know a lot of the reason you guys come to the office hours in the first place is to get the banter between Cameron and myself. But he had the audacity, the temerity, the guile, if you will, to go on vacation. So whatever. But yes, if you have a question live, go ahead and drop it in the chat. Happy to prioritize those. Otherwise, I have a few more questions that were submitted in advance. You can submit a question in advance to tractionlab.io, hit the content button. There's a form you can fill out. All right, so let's go on to the next one in the list. This is another B2B SaaS. We're on a roll with the B2B SaaS here today. That's 3 for 3. All right, B2B SaaS for marketing agencies. And you've got an MVP in progress. And the question is, when do you stop talking to customers and start building? I feel like every conversation gives us new feature ideas and we keep adding to the roadmap instead of shipping anything. Okay, cool. So I actually want to take a step. I'm going to answer your question directly, but first I'm going to take a step back and do a little course correction here. Because the purpose of customer discovery and talking to customers, doing those customer interviews is not to get a feature list. And it's not to learn what we're building. That's not the point. That's actually 2 or 3 steps ahead. The reason that we do customer discovery is to understand that there is, or to validate that there is a customer out there that we can clearly identify. And that if we get in front of them, we reliably predict that they have a severe and urgent problem that makes them a willing buyer for a solution. That's the point of the interviews. And once we have that, and I'll come back to answer your question about that in a second, but like once we have that, we're kind of done with that step. There might be specific things that we want to learn, and we might engage in future conversations to figure out where are these people making purchasing decisions, how do they discover new products, all that kind of stuff. Like we may have a targeted reason for doing interviews, but we're actually done with the interview process because we got what we needed to out of it, which is that there's people out there who really want a problem solved and they're willing to chuck some money at it. So that's what we learned from that. And then we move on to saying, okay, well, if we were to solve a problem this particular way, can we get these people to bite? And now that we know what they look like, we can conduct a validation experiment to put that offer in front of them, some type of offer in front of them to see if we can get them to opt in. That's not an interview. That's going to be, for example, a landing page test. You put a message on social media. That's maybe how you recruited these people to talk to in the first place. And you see, if I put this message in front of them with this particular solution, can I get them to walk through a fake door test or something like that? How do I run an experiment that actually validates their behavior? And again, we have not added any features to any roadmap. We're still not doing that because we're still trying to validate that there's a customer with a problem that we can solve for money. And once we figure that out, then the rest is details. And we still understand the thing that caused them to buy, our North Star. We understand what that is. And now we can move on to all of the details along the way. But what we don't want to do is collect feature ideas and then add them to the roadmap and like keep building out this MVP. You're doing this a little bit backward. If you're building an MVP based on customer interviews, you're actually jumping the gun a little bit, and you want to take a step back and see if you can validate that you're even on the right track first. Because if all of your customer interviews are pointing in the same direction, if they're pointing in this direction of, oh, it'd be cool if we had this feature, it'd be cool if we had that feature, you're actually not on anything. You probably haven't identified a customer who's going to pay for anything. That's why they're talking about features. It's an easy thing to talk about. Well, wouldn't it be nice if? And they're in this ideation space where they're telling you all these cockamamie schemes and wild ideas that they've had after 3 margaritas, and not really anything that's indicating that they're a willing buyer, that they have intent, that they're not showing you any indication of their intent to purchase or buying behavior. None of that they're actually showing to you. So if you're having conversations about features, you're staying in the land of make-believe and not in the land of buying behavior. So switch out of that. So the direct answer to your question, though, is how do you stop, when do you stop talking to customers and start building? Those are 2 separate things. So hopefully I've drawn a distinction. There's a couple of steps in between there. But when do you stop talking to customers? That's actually pretty straightforward. When you can do what I said at the outset, which is you can identify a customer that if we get in front of them, we can reliably predict that they have the problem that we think that they do, and that they experience that problem with sufficient severity and urgency that makes them a willing buyer. As soon as that becomes reliable and predictable, we're done with the interviews. They've served their purpose. And so as soon as they are consistent, like let's say you've done 10 in a row and they're all kind of feeling consistent, and that 11th one, the next potential interview, isn't going to cause you to make any decision that's different at this point. There's nothing left to learn from that conversation that is substantive, that we're 80% of the way there now, and it's diminishing returns. That's when you stop and move on to another form of evidence. Hope that's helpful. And if not, feel free to ask a follow-up. And if you're asking live, feel free to drop the follow-up live. You guys are quiet today, but that's all right. I know you're there. It's probably because Cameron's used to warming up the LinkedIn chat while I read off a question, and he's not doing it this time. But if you've got a question live, feel free to drop it in the chat. Otherwise, I still have 2 more questions to get through because you guys were busy on the online forum on TractionLab.io content. Fill out the form there. You can ask a question in advance as well. It's totally anonymous, as you can probably tell. The next question is beginning with, is it a red flag? I like that. All right. So the question is, they're in the idea stage. They're not, it's a startup type. They said they're not sure. Customer, not sure. They said not sure yet, honestly. Okay, cool. So sounds like pretty early stage. And the question is it a red flag if everyone says they'd use it, but no one wants to pay? Or is that the normal at this stage and we need to push harder on the ask? Haven't built anything yet, just doing interviews. So is it a red flag if everyone says they use it, but no one wants to pay? Yes, that is a red flag. But there's actually a red flag before that, which is if you're talking and everybody says that they use it, you're not asking the right questions anyway. That's a red flag against the behavior of the kind of validation that you're trying to do. I kind of answered a bit of that with the last question, so I won't repeat too much of that. But what we're trying to get to are open-ended questions to discover the qualia, discover what's going on in their heads at any particular time. We're looking for problems that make them go whites of their eyes, like, oh my gosh, yes, so let me tell you about a time that happened. We're looking for those really big, robust responses from them. And we're not looking for them to tell us whether or not they would use something, because the answer is usually unreliable. People are not great at predicting their future behavior anyway, because it's a hypothetical question. And it's often a magic wand at that point. Would you use an app if it made your life easier in this way? Sure. You're getting a lot of people saying yes. But that question is actually devoid of the context of actually making the decision. They have to part with some things in order to use that app. And you might be thinking, yeah, they have to part with some money. And that's true. But there's actually switching costs as well. There's other things that they have to part with. They have to part with time in order to get set up in the new thing, learning how to use it and adopting to that. There is, if you're serving on the B2B context, there's training that's involved. There's other people in the business that they have to get onboarded in the new tool. And regardless of any of that, they also have just the mental bandwidth of having to context switch into something new. It has to be sufficiently urgent and sufficiently painful that they're willing to even just dedicate the mental energy to adopt a new solution. And I talked about this a lot before, but like, if you think about it in your own life, and you just walk through your day, you're going to come up with multiple things that suck, right? Just little problems that we have, something in the kitchen when you're making breakfast that annoys you. And I'm going to say, well, why haven't you solved that? There are solutions for that out there. You go, well, I mean, it's not that big a deal at the end of the day. Because without that context, we're going to come up with these signals for problems that people have that they were never going to pay for. And the way you know that is that there's plenty of problems that you're not paying for a solution for right now. I shared this story on TikTok a while back, but is that I had a blow dryer in the bathroom, and the cable's kind of long, and it comes with this nice convenient little cable tie, so I keep it just the length that I need it. And I was defrosting the freezer to try to fix like the ice maker in there, and so I used the hair dryer for a brief moment in that. And so I brought it to another room and undid the cord and everything else. Anyway, when I put it back in the bathroom, I wrapped the cord back up just how I had it and set it down. Next day after I showered, I grabbed the hair dryer, and I noticed that it is the cord's a little too short. And so I, kind of bend over awkwardly so that I could use the hair dryer, because otherwise I would have had to stop. I would have unravel the cord and do a couple of lengths and then tie it back over and try to do that. And that's not that big a deal. And when I say it out loud, it sounds really silly that I didn't do it, but it was just easier in the moment. I'm trying to get through. I got a kid to feed, right? And I just do the bend over thing. Next day, same thing. Oh, I'll fix it tomorrow. Next day, oh, I'll fix it tomorrow. It actually took 2 weeks before I got fed up enough that I unraveled the thing and then actually fixed it. And it was a problem that was easy to fix. And it did suck. Like, I had to bend over here, but it wasn't severe and urgent enough that I was willing to dedicate even a small amount of time to solving it. It just wasn't important enough. If I listed all the problems in my life, or even all the problems in my morning, it didn't make the top 3. And so I didn't dedicate any time to it. Everybody else is on the same page with exactly the same thing. And so you can be, when you talk to somebody about the problems that they're having and you're starting to get all these universally positive feedback, you're probably tapping into something like that. It's a minor frustration. It's not one of their top 3 problems. They don't have sufficient severity and urgency with that problem to translate them into a willing buyer. That's just at the start. And then when you add in that you're trying to get them to put some money for it and they say they would be willing to pay for it, then they're just further providing evidence that this red flag was warranted for you. So that's that. That having been said, your question, is that normal at this stage? Yes, but fix it, because this is something that you can change on your side. Ask open-ended questions. Get them to tell you about the past. Try to find those problems. Ask them what they're doing to try to solve it now. What's something that they tried? Why didn't that work? What kind of resources did they dedicate to it? Did they pay money to try to solve it? Why didn't that work? Are they planning on trying something else? Did they give up? Did they accomplish it in kind of a hacky way? What are the pains that they're experiencing because it's not solved? Is it costing them money? All of those things. Those are signals that you can actually grab onto to say that this is something that's actually important to them. And then make sure you understand that in the context of their life. Because if you just asked me about the hairdryer, I would have said it was a problem and that I can solve it. It's super fast. I'm going to solve it tomorrow. And I would have meant it when I sent it, but I was never going to do it because without understanding the full context of my morning, you don't understand that I have 3 other problems and this is not more important than any of them. Cool. All right, I've got one final pre-submitted question. As is usual, when only me or only Cameron are here, we get through the questions pretty fast because that fun interplay we have between us is not here, but Cameron will be back next week. If you got a question live, last chance to kind of drop that into the chat. Happy to address your questions live. Otherwise, you can pre-submit them, tractionlab.io, hit the content button, form you can fill out. Last question, and it is totally anonymous, as you've probably seen. So, all right, we are doing like a really big pivot here because now we're going to move to a startup that is B2B SaaS for e-commerce brands that is doing somewhere between 100,000 and 1 million in ARR. So very different from the customer discovery side. So let's take a moment, reset our brains to a very different stage of startup. Here's the question. They said, growing fine, but churn is creeping up and I can't tell if it's a product problem or just normal. How do you figure out why people are actually leaving when the exit surveys are useless? And they also said most people just don't fill out the survey or say too expensive, which I don't buy. No pun intended, I'm assuming. All right, I love this question. This is a good one because this is something that almost any startup is going to encounter at some point, is the problem of churn. And there's a number of different ways that I could take this because the question's kind of light as far as detail is concerned. That's okay. I'm not knocking on you, but that just means I don't have enough to pick a path. So I pick a couple paths and ramble for a few minutes on churn. So yeah, here we go. First is there are really only 3 reasons a customer churns. And they're in this order of importance. It's people, promise, and product, what we call the 3 Ps. Most founders try to jump to the product one. So customers are churning because our onboarding sucks. Customers are churning because there's the UX isn't great. The customer's churning because we just, they want this other feature. They're focusing on all these product ways to solve it. So they form hypotheses around the product and build features that has a long cycle before we actually get any data back to figure out if we're right. And it's usually not what's causing the churn anyway. Not that it doesn't cause churn, it does, but it doesn't cause a churn problem, usually. The other 2 are much more important. That's people and promise. And so the promise is, are we actually even delivering on the value proposition that we said we would? So they go to the landing page, they see helps you do X, and you get to this outcome Y. And so they go, I'm in, they sign up, and they just don't get help with X, and they don't get outcome Y. And so they're like, peace out, y'all, and leave. That's real. If you're not delivering on what you actually told them and what you actually sold them on, people go leave. Like, why would they say? But that is usually something that's known. And when you have conversations with customers who are churning, which I would recommend that you do instead of just doing a survey, I would actually reach out, see if you can get some of these people on the phone. You don't say what quantity you're talking about here, but you'll surely get some of them to talk to you. And then also talk to the customers who have been with you for a while and find out what their experience is and find out why those 2 groups are different. If you do end up with something on the promise side, cool. The last one, the first one in the list, but the last one to talk about is the people. And this is the customers. Like, do we even have the right customer? And so oftentimes we're spending time and energy trying to sell to a customer who is never going to stick with us anyway. And because we were trying to we spent all this effort selling to this person who wasn't going to stay. Like we were just like building up and spending money on the inevitable. They were going to leave anyway because they never had the problem with sufficient severity and urgency, but we gave them such a good deal or blah, 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 that we were able to close the deal and get them on board. But it was always a little bit of an experiment that was worth, $20 a month for a couple of months to figure it out. So make sure that we're targeting the right people. And that's where, going back to the suggestion I made before, is actually talking to customers, figuring out these are people who are leaving and this is why, and these are people who are staying and this is why, and then seeing what those two groups have in common. But more importantly, what makes them different? Because that may be that difference is going to help us more sharply define our wedge into the market, because these are the customers that we actually want to spend time and energy on. They're going to stick with us. Whereas these other customers, if we get the ones that look like this, they're just going to leave. So see if you can identify some of that. So that's part of the churn thing. The other thing that I want to identify is, like you said, churn is creeping up and I can't tell if it's a problem or just normal. So as far as the just normal part, if you're worried about the churn, it's probably not normal. If it's anything more than a couple of percent, it's probably not normal. If you're churning at 10, 20%, like you're in big trouble, mister. Like that's not good at all. And so if you're worried about churn, it actually probably is an issue. It's probably not normal. But I want to couch that in a little bit of math. So we've talked, if you've hung around on office hours before, we've talked about the unit economics of startups. We've talked about like customer acquisition cost and lifetime value and the payback period. And this is a really great exercise to bring those back up again. So the basic math of a startup is it costs you a certain amount to get a customer, and it costs you a certain amount to deliver the value to the customer. And then they're paying you a certain amount of money. And if you combine those things together into an equation, you get a period of time that we call the payback period. That is the minimum amount of time that they have to stay with you before you even recoup the cost it took to onboard them in the first place. So it costs you $100 to sell them. You charge $10 a month. It costs you $3 a month to serve them. That's $7 a month. You're not making any money off of them at all until they've been with you for at least 13 months. Right? 13 times 7 is 101, and your cost was $100. So you've made $1 if they're with you 13 months. That's not going to work out, right? That's super dangerous territory to be in, because your payback period is too long. And so that either means you have to lower the customer acquisition cost, and we have to do because we're trying to do something that's more of a product-led growth strategy. And so that just by necessity means we need to spend less money on customer acquisition. That's just how that works. Whereas if we're doing like high touch sales, we can't charge $10 a month. That doesn't work, right? We need to instead charge $50 a month, because now our payback period has gone from 13 months down to 3 months. Cool, right? But it isn't until you hit that payback period that you actually start to make any money at all. So as we think about churn, is that churn, like is the average retention that we're getting, is that churn happening before or after the payback period? Because it actually might be in a case where we're getting sufficient churn, sufficiently frequently at least, that we're actually just losing money on every single person that we sell. So if our, just to continue with the exact same mathematical example, if our payback period is 13 months and our average retention is 9 months, stop selling. Like stop selling, period. Like stop selling to people. Close down for a minute and figure out how to fix this, because every single customer that you bring on board is going to cost you money. You will not make that money up, because 9 is less than 13. You will lose money on every single customer that you sell. So stop selling them. It's not going to work. Instead, we need to figure out how to make that work before we sell another customer. And so you need to do some math there to figure it out. Like, is it normal? Probably not. Is it normal and survivable? If so, then okay, let's keep going and like figure out how we close this, come up with some hypotheses, and then figure out how we close that gap. Otherwise, we're in deep doo-doo, as they say. Okay, couple more things. There's lots of threads to pull in here. You said, this isn't in the part I put on the screen, but under anything else, they wrote, most people just don't fill out the survey. That's to be expected. Or they say it's too expensive, which I don't buy. So this is like where you don't get a vote in this. They're saying it's too expensive, and you're saying, but it's cheap and it's saving them money. No, they're telling you it's too expensive. Like, you just need to believe them. But that doesn't mean, and this is where you might actually be reacting to when you say, I don't believe them, is that a lot of people will think that if something's too expensive, then the only way to make it not too expensive is to lower the cost. And that's one way to do it. But usually, absent actually just charging too much money for something, like trying to, charge job seekers, who are looking for, first jobs, $100 a month to help them with their resume. Like at that point, you're just too expensive for that. Like that's not going to work, right? That customer can't afford that. That would be a bad bet on their part, and they're not going to do that. But aside from those kinds of cases where you have that mismatch between what the customer can afford and the price, most of the time when somebody's telling you it's too expensive, what they mean is, I'm not getting enough value to justify the money. And that's the piercing criticism that you actually have to internalize and then figure out why. Because they're telling you it's not worth the money. Believe them and find out why it's not worth the money. Have conversations with them. Actually get them on the phone. By phone, I of course mean get them on Google Meet, but like get them on a video call and have a conversation with them to try to figure out who they are, what value they were hoping to get, whether or not they got that value, and then why they left. And the last question is sort of a proxy. The first ones are where you're actually going to get the real insights, because you might discover that what they thought that they were going to get out of it, you were never going to give them in the first place. And that isn't even wrong. That just could mean that we're just targeting the wrong people. For some reason, they're glomming onto our, like they're biting up our message and signing up, but really they were going to churn anyway. So we need to sharpen our language to exclude those people, because we don't want them signing up. They're just costing us money. Or you could learn that you were trying to solve their problem and it just wasn't getting solved for them. And that might have something to do with the kind of company that they are. They may be a company that doesn't meet some of the assumptions that you made in the product. Like maybe you assumed that they were going to integrate this with Slack, and they're a small company and they don't use Slack. And so they don't use any of those communications tools. And so like there's a chunk that's missing for them as far as like the workflow is concerned, and that you assumed was covered by another tool. It's not. Those are the kinds of things that you can identify. And again, you might have discovered like, well, that's a customer issue, right? And it is, but it could be something that we can say, do we want to solve this now? Or is this something we want to solve in the future once our wedge is working a bit better? But either way, we're trying to sharpen down that path. And that is all I have to say about that. That's actually not true. You guys know me well enough to know I have much more to say about that. But that was a long answer to what was fundamentally a pretty short question. So I will choose to put a pin in it there. If you want to, I'm going to do some shameless plugs, but if you want to, you can feel free in the comments to drop another coin in the machine, and I will keep going on that subject or whatever subject you want. Also, feel free to let me know what you guys are thinking as well. Feel free to drop your thoughts into the comments. I always appreciate that as well. A couple of things drop on your radar. So we've got a podcast episode that will be dropping tomorrow. If you're listening to this live, they're every Saturday. We are just like really getting close to 100 episodes of the Traction Lab podcast, which Cam and I are super proud about. So we're going to be doing something a little bit special for our 100th episode. We're going to do a live recording in person. That'll be in July, date TBD, but keep an eye out for that, because that's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to gather together, have a little bit of fun, do a live recording of the Traction Lab podcast, incorporate all of you guys into the process as well. Super fun. So keep an eye out for that. Next, we've got the applications are open for our investment readiness engine, which I plugged last week. So if you're in the Sacramento area and you're a startup that is looking to raise money and you're at that stage where that makes sense for you, then we have a program that has been generously funded by an innovation grant from the city of Sacramento for the Traction Lab to support you over a period of about 9 months to make your company more fundable. And throughout that process, there's a lot that goes into that, but make your company more fundable, not working on the pitch deck, but actually working on the business to make sure it's worth pitching, really level you guys up in that aspect. And then at the end, there'll be a showcase where the best performing companies in that investment readiness portfolio will compete for a $100,000 equity investment into the company. So super fun. TractionLab.io/IRE, and you can fill out the app. You can learn more there and then fill out the application for it. And then lastly, we have our Traction Lab Venture School next cohort kicking off soon. So if you're anywhere from idea to through pre-seed, anywhere in those stages, and trying to figure out how to sell to customers and how to create sales in a predictable and repeatable and therefore scalable way to work on that engine of growth, whether it's your first customer or your 10th, trying to get them to have those sales be super consistent, then check out the Traction Lab Venture School. It's all we focus on. It's a full year of support from the Traction Lab. And so you can check that out at tractionlab.io/TLPS. So yeah, awesome stuff there. Um, let's see, the page. Got a question here. All right. Page didn't refresh when the video started, so I missed the answer to my question. Is the replay downloadable? On YouTube, it is. On LinkedIn, I think they make that a little challenging. You kind of got to hunt through. But on YouTube, you can download it through the usual ways, or you can use one of the YouTube downloaders that I won't publicly endorse, but that are out there to pull those. Also, the replay of this from an audio format will be in Wednesday's feed, or the feed on Wednesday for the Traction Lab podcast. So you can check that out. There. Cool beans. With that, I will go ahead and land the plane a little bit early, but again, without the dialogue with me and Cameron, everything goes by a little fast. So thanks so much for joining us. Me, I guess I'm used to saying us, joining me this week for a little fun. Cameron's back next week. Looking forward to our usual rapport and dialogue. And check out the Traction Lab podcast. Make sure you subscribe to that wherever you subscribe to your podcasts. And check out the many programs the Traction Lab has to offer. Looking forward to working more closely with all of you. And with that, I'm going to sign off the way we always do, with a good old